Are you ready? Ooh, I know you see me. Okay. Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Thank you so much for being here. I'm so excited to have you, including if you're new. I am also equally as excited to have you. You should stick around for a while. Craziest idea, I know, but so about a week ago, I went on this long rant on one of my just like private stories about my place as a 20-year-old in the world and how it feels weird because it's blurring so much into the lives of teenagers. And I was just talking about constantly still feeling like a teenager as I go through my 20s, and a lot of people were responding to that post and asking me to try and make a video about it. So that made me get to thinking about age as it relates to fandom and trying to think of ways to kind of make the whole age conversation and feeling like a teenager about music and pop culture. And I found that I can, and that there's a whole conversation to be had about people's age and fandoms and the blurred lines between being a 20 something and being a teenager and the teenage dream aesthetic in music in general. So that's what we're going to do today. We're going to put all of these things together into one video and kind of talk about age as it relates to fandom and growing older, and age as it relates to music, and sort of this new Tumblr girl that we're shifting into as a society. I don't know. And for this video, I did reach out and ask you guys for your opinions and experiences. And I got so many responses that were really helpful for insight and inspiration making this video. It was really nice to hear what you had to say. So if you submitted something, thank you. It was really helpful. But yeah, that's today's video. So let's get started talking about age and fandoms and music's teenage dream. So I think it's been apparent for a while now that music and aesthetics can go hand in hand a lot of times, especially or mainly if you're super active in a fandom or if you're super engaged with stan culture and fangirl culture. Being in a fandom and being active with fangirl culture and looking up to your faves does have a way of affecting how you speak, how you dress, how you decorate your room, and just like the basic aesthetic that you carry as a human being. And it's been like that for a while. A very high percentage of you guys who responded to my form for this video did report that you feel like you have to speak, dress, act, or be a certain way or a certain aesthetic as a fangirl in a fandom. And a lot of the people who said that in my responses are under the age of 19, and you guys were the younger crowds who were sort of living your life in these aesthetics as they relate to your fandom. And this is nothing new. We saw so much of this come into fruition in the 2010s with the Tumblr girl culture and people using music like Lana Del Rey, Melanie Martinez, The Neighborhood to kind of form this aesthetic and identity around the music that they listen to. I talked about this so much in a video that I did a few months ago on sad girls in music if you kind of want a deeper exploration of the aesthetic of that, but that's exactly what I'm talking about here in this video. Nothing new, it's just something that's kind of evolved with time. But yeah, back then being a Tumblr girl, so to speak, was the way to be and the way to live your life for people who spent most of their time online and engaged with fandom culture, and this affected people who were in their teens or late teens, early adulthood. I make it sound like a disease. This unfortunate Tumblr girl disease affects people aged 16 through 21. Like, okay, girl. Anyway, my point here is just that there is always this sort of way to be coming in and out of popularity over time for people who are in fandoms or are active fangirls. And that's just like anything and everything else. There's trends and a way to be in a style coming in and out of popularity all the time. It's ever moving and ever changing. And the fangirl quote unquote aesthetic is always changing as well. This video is just kind of highlighting what it seems to be right now. And what it is right now is what I call the rise of like this very teenage Pinterest girl, TM. I don't know what to call it, so that's what I call it, but I am gonna try and give you examples of what this looks like just based on what I've seen in this day and age. This aesthetic is basically made up of these very pretty and organized collection of wall prints, lots of tiny red hearts and plants and candles and bookmarks, heart lockets, flowers, love letters. Everything just feels so soft and lovely with this new fangirl aesthetic or teenage fangirl aesthetic. It seems very croquette inspired, if you guys know what that aesthetic is. Just very soft and lovely, and it all feels like this one big personal handwritten love letter to your favorite celebrity with like perfume on it. That's what it feels like if I had to use something to describe it. And along with this aesthetic, I've kind of discovered that there's this new thing people are doing. Well, I don't know how new it is, but there's this thing people are doing where they take their artist's favorite name and then put the word core at the end of it to get this sort of aesthetic picture or collection of pictures of your fave. So if I was going to do it, I would put like Harry core or Ash core, Olivia core. And if you put that into the Pinterest search bar, then it comes up with these very specific collection of pictures that fall into this teenage dream aesthetic for your fave. And it's super cute. I have a Pinterest board like that where I keep pictures of my faves organized in this aesthetic, like Harry core, Louis core kind of thing. It's cute. And then another component of this newer fangirl aesthetic is these little diary accounts that I've come across a lot in the past few months. I typically find them on TikTok and Instagram, and it'll be someone's name and then diary. So if I was doing one, it would just be like Jasmine's diary. And it's just a page for fangirls to have a little collection of their faves, kind of following the core aesthetic that we were talking about earlier. And with these little diaries, it's just people engaging in this aesthetic that we're talking about with their faves, like making little love letters for them and little bookmarks for them and spinning records and doing their homework. They're studying and romanticizing school, listening to their faves at the same time, reading lots of popular books, making handmade jewelry with your fave on it somewhere, like heart necklaces and even like phone chains with like little beads and bracelets, all kinds of things like that. It's just interesting because it feels so far away from the Tumblr sad girl that we were used to in the beginning, but at the same time, it feels so fitting and understandable, and it's like this Tumblr fandom thing, but a little bit grown up and modern, which obviously makes a lot of sense because that's how life works. But something that I realized when coming across this aesthetic in this whole world and this grown-up new fangirl thing is that a lot of active fangirls are using this aesthetic to think of themselves as a brand. And they set up their life almost like they are the artist that they're a fangirl of, you know what I mean? Like they think of themselves in a brand and they think of their life as an aesthetic and set everything up around that accordingly. A lot of you guys who were responding to me in the forums that I put out in my community tab for this video kept referring to your life in eras. And I don't know if you guys like realized that you were doing that, but so many people were writing responses talking about the different eras of their life and their personal brand as a person, kind of like they are a celebrity who has different eras like Taylor Swift. And we've talked so much about that in the It Factor, the different eras that celebrities have. It's so fascinating to me because I realize that I unintentionally do this to my life too. It's not like something I know some people sit down and carefully craft and plan it, but I don't feel like that's something I do. I just do this unintentionally. I think of things as my brand and I want to belong to a certain look and I want to belong to a certain thing. And my life is set up in these different eras, like I'm a celebrity. And people love to dress after their faves. A lot of you guys were telling me about that. You love to buy the clothes that they have and buy the jewelry that they have or try to look like them, especially if you're going to a concert. And it just makes me wonder why we as music consumers imitate these things and kind of copy them into our own lives like this. Is it to fill the void of just being a mundane person? Is it to make things more exciting and organized because we're just mundane people? Is it to feel closer to the fave just because you love and appreciate them so much? Is it about being binded to others because we're all kind of doing the same thing and it's fun to belong to something in that way? I truly cannot explain this, but those are all the components that I have sort of noticed over time, and especially in planning for this video, that are kind of a part of this new Pinterest teenage dream fangirl wonderland, because I don't have a name for it. But now, obviously, Pinterest and TikTok have a lot more influence than Tumblr does, but in the same way that Tumblr used to. Although all the things that were wrong with Tumblr are still wrong with this new wave of aesthetics and such, like being too whitewashed or causing toxic body image and all these problems with beauty standards and things like that. So it's really fun. Yay. But I do also want to say the reason I keep referring to this aesthetic as like the new fangirl teenage dream specifically is because so much of popular music right now is revolving around really young artists, teenage artists who are singing on their teenage experiences. Like a lot of these fangirls that I'm talking about really look up to Olivia Rodrigo and Conan Gray and Gracie Abrams and Tate McRae and even Billie Eilish. And obviously they're all really young and have made teen-oriented music, like I said, on their teenagehood and their lifestyle and occurrences and things that have happened to them. And this kind of teen-oriented music makes it really easy to sort of romanticize being a teenager or completely demonize your time as a teenager, and that's what sort of brings this aesthetic that I'm talking about full circle. You got the look, you got the lifestyle, and then you got the music to go with it. What more do you need? And I did ask my younger crowd on my little forums what makes teen-oriented music like this and these idols so crucial in your life and so important to you. And a lot of you guys responded with the same thing, that being able to have these songs to use to romanticize being a teenager really makes up for things that COVID took away from you, experiences that you didn't get to have because of it, or even experiences that you just haven't got to have in general that you feel like you're supposed to be having. So you're sort of living through the music, which I think is really cool. Other of you guys have said that the music makes you excited for the things that they're talking about when it comes to being a teenager and growing up, such as falling in love. But a lot of you guys also said that you're excited for the heartbreak part just because that's what these people go through and you're ready for it and expecting it because you have these lyrics to fall on, which blew my mind when I read that. Obviously, it's not the same for everyone, but just reading that some people have the experience of being excited for things like heartbreak because of these teen idols is so crazy to me and so interesting. I've really never even thought about teen-oriented music setting things up like that for someone. A quote that I really loved is by Anu, who's 18, and they said, "I'm very introverted and I find music by people from my generation really speaks to me and influences the way I process my emotions." Which I think is why some people are saying that they are ready for the heartbreak, because this music allows you to process through things like that because they're essentially saying exactly what you feel. I think a lot of people are using these teen idols and this kind of music and this whole aesthetic to romanticize being a teen so much that you almost fear not being a teen anymore, or you fear growing up because of it. And a lot of you said that you do struggle to find an identity and personality outside of this, outside of teenhood and all these things that you're, quote, supposed to be liking and doing because you're a teenager. And I think a lot of people can relate to that, especially if you feel like your whole identity is being a teenage fangirl specifically, because that is my reality and that is my truth all through my teenhood. My whole identity was just being a teen fangirl. So I get that part really completely. I feel like if you have like the internet friends and the whole lifestyle and the decor and all this merch and a fave to constantly look up to, I feel like it can be so easy to stay in that because it's familiar and comforting and it's hard to find anything outside of that. I get it. I've said plenty of times in my videos before that being a teenage girl these days is very difficult. It's so hard to be a teenage girl. So I understand completely why someone would want to kind of live in this thing that feels made for them and stay there and nowhere else. Especially if the thing is teen oriented. Like I said, it feels handmade for you. It feels like what you're supposed to be doing. So when someone like Olivia Rodrigo, for example, comes along, what else are you gonna do? It makes so much sense that teenagers want to live in the music and idolize her and dress like her and like set your life up around this thing that makes you who you are. I think the one thing that really hasn't changed that much over time in the fangirl sense as we moved away from Tumblr is like the sad element of it. A viewer of mine filled out a form. Her name is Ella, and she's the one who brought up this point, and I think it's an amazing point. It really makes you think. It feels like the sad girl element just evolves with time, and so no matter what's going on or no matter what's popular, the element of being a sad teenage girl is always going to be there somehow in some way, and for some reason. These idols are the ones who are kind of making teenagers just seem perpetually sad and in despair and angsty, which raises the question of, do teenagers want an idol that is happier, or is that the point of them? Is this the teenage way of getting through insecurity and heartbreak and all the angst and confusion and loneliness? Is that the way you get through it? It's all just connected. It's all full circle. I think the reason why everything seems so sad is because, of course, you're going to focus on the elements where you feel like you need support from other people. That's what music is really for, getting through emotions like that. So I understand why the teen would be viewed as sad, or why teen pop stars are making music that feels sad oriented. But what about when you grow up and you are not a teen anymore? Oop, oop. Do these things like still stick when you're older than your teenage years? Yes. And there is small disparity these days between a 16-year-old and a 23-year-old, which is exactly where we need to talk about the blurred lines between teenagehood and adulthood, especially as it relates to music and fandom.
I'm only 17, I don't know anything, but I know I miss you.
I think a lot of this conversation was inspired for me by those TikToks I keep seeing about people going to see an Olivia Rodrigo show as someone who's like 20 and older. And those TikToks keep going viral. They're like, are we too old to be here? When they're like 23 at an Olivia Rodrigo concert.
Am I too old to be here?
What?
Am I too old to be here?
No, of course not.
Does it look weird that I'm here?
No, not at all.
Am I hotter than these little bitches?
Yes, you look amazing.
And it made me realize that people see being a fangirl or being in a fandom or liking certain types of music as a teenage thing, and that there's people who exist that can't really see the reasoning and still listening to these people and being engaged with this culture when you're a little bit older. Well, I will say that I'm 21 on Saturday and Olivia's Sour film made me sob like a baby the entire time. So, okay, what? What does that mean for us? What does that mean for me? I think a lot of older stans still like and appreciate people like Olivia and Tate and Gracie because it gives us a way to sort of grieve or miss our younger years. Again, there's just something so emotional and nostalgic about those years. So, just like teenage stans are doing this and living in it to stay in it, I think older stans are still living in it to kind of go back and be there. Especially because, like I said, it's extremely difficult to find identity outside of being a teenage fangirl. Also, art is just art. If a song beautifully captures what I'm feeling and the emotions that I go through, it doesn't really matter how old the writer is. So, I do think that the lines are blurred a lot between being a young teenager or an older teenager, a young adult, an older adult. They're just starting to blur together because we all have so much freedom to post what we want and consume what we want and like what we want. So then we all end up liking and consuming the same things and having the same humor. And then it starts to feel a little bit weird and confusing. I have a friend named Jillian who told me that it feels weird feeling like there's no difference between her at 16 and her now because so much has changed. But at the same time, it feels like nothing has changed. So, this phenomenon makes older people sort of feel stuck in time and sucked back to when they were younger. And then there's all kinds of things going on for the younger people where it's like, oh, I fear growing up. I want to live in this forever. But one thing I will say is I don't think it's really fair to demonize older stans because being a fangirl can also be seen as just a hobby and not a weird obsession. And this is a hobby that a lot of times becomes a job. Like in my case, people grow up and they end up having jobs in the industry or doing something that they learned the skills for by being a fangirl or running a Stan account or being engaged in the logistics of all of that. It's like a job. So sometimes that hobby does become a job and you're still engaged with that culture when you're older. And pretty much any type of media that has sprouted these like really hardcore fan communities is like created and worked on by adult people. They're the ones who are creating the media that you're consuming, setting up campaigns for the things that you love, making things possible that you love as a fangirl in a fandom. And a lot of times, these adults who are working on these things were fans just like you, oftentimes of the same thing. On this topic, a Reddit user noted, "We also teach young girls that once they grow up, they need to abandon all their hobbies and interests to be a real adult, often defined by being a wife and a mother. And isn't that depressing? I want young women to want more than that for themselves." I agree wholeheartedly. I just don't want it to be a thing where people grow up and grow into their 20s and start to feel like they're not allowed to have hobbies like this anymore because they're supposed to be doing these societal things that women have to do and abandon their hobbies for. I think you can keep your hobbies, they just become a little bit different when you're older, and that's the same for when you're in a fandom or you're a fangirl or you're engaged in the music industry, anything like that. And I don't want to scare any young fans into thinking that growing up is losing something valuable because it's absolutely not. Just like music topics change as people grow older, the way that you consume those topics and the way that you see the people that you love and interact them changes too in a good and healthy way. And the sports analogy still applies here. Everyone loves to use the sports analogy, it still applies. Grown men are allowed to have this hobby of being really into football and sports fandoms and freaking out, getting angry, whatever. And adult women are allowed to do the same thing with music fandoms. It always goes back to misogyny. Why is that like my hottest topic? But I should also mention that people who are my age and older sort of built Stan Twitter from the ashes up, okay? We were the ones who made it what it is with time and change, so it's not really fair to push people like that out of the scene. You know, this is the space we created. It makes a lot of sense that we would still take up that space as we get older, especially because our faves are getting older too, and also especially because younger fans can choose not to interact if they don't want to. There are some minors who make it clear they don't feel comfortable interacting with adults in online spaces, and that's perfectly fine. Internet safety is important, and while you can never really tell if a stranger is who they say they are, listing Do Not Interact, or DNI, categories can be a way to help customize someone's online experience to make them more comfortable. So it's perfectly fine for kids and teens to try to stay away from adults on the internet and enjoy things like online fandom spaces with people closer to their own age. And a lot of you guys who are younger told me in your forums that you actually love seeing people who are a little bit older still engage with fandom fandom culture and having this hobby that they love, because it shows you that you can still do these things when you get older. And it's really comforting to see that you're still engaging with the space and with your faves and with music and the industry, just in a different way. When I was a little bit younger, I always thought older people in the fandom were really cool, and I wanted to be them because they made their own money from their own job and got to go to whatever shows they wanted to and buy whatever merch they wanted to and could drive themselves to concerts and drink and be cool and listen to music. I always thought they were the coolest. And it is really cool to grow up and still be engaged with fangirl culture because those things are true and because you become so much more like in tune with what you like and your identity and what you can handle. There was actually an anonymous 24-year-old who talked about this in my forums, and they said, I'm still active in supporting my faves, but I feel like I go about it in a more mature and controlled way than I do when I was a teenager. E.g., I know when to take breaks and prioritize myself and my mental health. I don't really get involved in fandom drama these days. I know to have a healthy relationship with my faves and know my place as a fan before sometimes the lines were blurred. Which is so true. As you get older in fandoms and involved in the music industry, the hobby just becomes different, like I said, and you learn new ways to support your faves and to still be engaged. And a lot of times, older fans are the ones who are coming up with these really cool fan projects and handing out things on tour and doing promo projects for their faves just because they have the time and availability. And I think that's the coolest thing ever. Like I said earlier, that's exactly how you find something you're passionate about and sometimes something that you want to make into a job. It's just no matter what, there's always going to be room to grow and change with your fave and with the industry, no matter what. And that can be really comforting for some people to hear. So while this teenage dream aesthetic is upon us, I definitely don't want that to be something that feels like we're pushing out people who are a little bit older, because I'm in my 20s and I still act like one of those teenage fangirls. Like I said, I'm trying to set me up one of those diary accounts. They're super cute. And I really don't see that much of an issue in living your life sort of following this aesthetic because it's comforting and you want to live in it and that's how you want your life to be set up. I think it's really cool. I think it's really fun. And fangirl culture is for everyone. So I'm really glad I got to do this video. I think it was a really interesting topic that nobody really talks about, and kind of an interesting look into what you guys think about age as it relates to music and fandom. So let me know what you think in the comments. Thank you so much for participating, and also thank you for watching. Don't forget to check out the description for my social medias. Follow me on all mine. You never know when a Jasmine's Diary account is going to pop up, okay? I also have a form down there for video requests if you have an idea for me or something you really want me to cover. Check it really frequently so you can leave it there. I hope you're all doing absolutely amazing, drinking all the water and thriving, and I'll see you in my next video.